Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It is Jenn and Adarian for the Let Me Introduce You podcast. This is episode number 9. We are talking about the pelvic floor and its role in athletic performance. FYI, I did not pick the topic. This was all Adarian.
You gonna throw me under the bus like that?
Oh, I totally am.
Oh, okay then. Okay. It's on then.
But we are going to start with just a brief overview of what the pelvic floor is, because I think this is a term that's thrown around a lot, and if we're not all on the same page,
Well, I'm asking one question.
Okay.
Isn't the pelvic floor the bottom?
The bottom. It's the bowl at the bottom of the pelvis.
Okay.
And so what is the pelvis, right? The pelvis consists of 3 bones: your ilium, your ischium, and your pubis. It has 4 joints, according to some papers, which are your pubic symphysis, your lumbosacral joint, your sacroiliac joint, and your sacrococcygeal joint.
Okay. Isn't there a ligament across that pubis symphysis? Isn't it a nice tight ligament?
There is, yes, which is what allows for that subtle little oscillation you can get in your pelvis.
Yeah. You know you can move that, right?
What's that?
You can move it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just making sure I'm on the right trail. Yeah.
Okay. It is the dome.
I'm just trying to figure out like the big mystery. I'm just trying to figure out.
Big mystery. There, yeah. Now, the one thing that is interesting about the pelvic floor is you've got all of those muscles that attach around the outside of the pelvis, which are related to your hip.
Right.
People get very into that. But first, we should go into like what actually are the muscles that are in the pelvic floor. And they're generally, the bulk of them consist of the levator ani, which are the pubic rectalis, the pubic coccygeus, and the iliococcygeus. And they basically just make this bowl at the bottom of the pelvis.
And so I'm going slow today just because I'm just trying to make sure we clearly understand this. So you have these bones.
These bones, yep.
And what makes, so you have these bones that makes the bowl.
Yes.
Form the shape of a bowl, but you have these muscles that run around there too.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So the physiology, what does the pelvic floor do? It maintains bowel and bladder function, sexual function, and pregnancy. It also helps maintain pressure throughout the...
Go back. What does this again?
It maintains bowel and bladder function, sexual function, and pregnancy. And it also maintains pressure. It helps basically make sure the organs, everything's good in your abdominal region.
Let me go back to this again. So I have a left side.
Yes.
And I have a right side.
Correct.
And they tilted about like this here.
Right.
Okay. And then this is kind of like split right here.
Yes.
Right. And then these two don't come together like this because there's something in between them, right?
Right. Correct.
And then you have this hole in the middle, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then what sits in this hole in the middle?
Well, those are those muscles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what does this have to, what's that?
Go ahead.
So what does this have to do with athletics and sports performance? Well, I'm going to start by saying the pelvis is a hot topic in the running world.
Yes, it is.
Like a really hot topic.
It's a hot topic because people talk about the tilt of it. That's one thing people talk about is how it tilts, and I'm thinking like, yeah, whatever. But the problem with anything is this here. When we look at the structure of, because that's why I'm really going into detail about how's this thing connected. How, I got this left side, I got this right side, and the front part doesn't connect. The 2 back sides don't connect because there's something in between them also.
Yeah.
So you say you got these other joints that you're dealing with, and this side can do something, this side can do something, and this thing in the middle can do something. Like all these things that can move. And then the biggest thing too is, what we're not talking about that we have to talk about in this process is at the base of this thing is what? Ischial tuberosity, right?
Yes.
Who attaches there? A lot of things attach there, but what's the biggest thing that attach there?
Long head of the biceps femoris.
Just
Yeah.
the lung there?
Does semi-tendinosus and semi-membranosus attach there too? Okay.
Everybody's there.
Except for the
They
short head.
short head goes to the femur, but that is attached like high point, low point, low point. But they all
Okay.
have they all go there, yes.
Right.
You know, and so you have those things going there. But who's mostly control, what's going to happen with the tilt of the pelvis? Because they run straight to the tibia. If the tibia moves,
Yes.
So so you have that going. You have some other things going on there too. When people talk about psoas and things like that. But you have a lot of times people what they call is they clench their butt cheeks up.
Yep.
Which they call tilting their pelvis.
Yes.
And everything. Versus the torso moving independent of the pelvis, and then I got this femur that can, I got all these things that can move and everything.
Right.
So I'm just making sure we have a clear definition of these things, in the joints and things like that, But okay, go ahead.
Yes. And so one other thing I will say about the pelvis and running, because I just finished writing about it in our upcoming running book, is one of the things I find interesting about it is when your foot hits the ground, there's a collision.
Yes.
One of the things that occurs during that collision is a slight pitch of the pelvis backwards. So a slight posterior tilt of the pelvis. It's small.
Right.
And then as soon as you move over the foot, the pelvis goes back to being in an anterior pelvic tilt because there needs to be space for the leg to swing and move through and for the torso to move as well.
Right.
So the rotations that occur in the pelvis, I mean, it all kind of makes sense when you look at it from a rotational standpoint. It's all to create this locomotion pattern, right?
So, well, yeah, but I think what people miss more than anything else is like say we have this slight rotation. That movement is like because you had the collision. You
Right.
basically you're gonna have the femur really just get jammed up inside that socket.
Yep.
And that's what you see when people you see that happening there.
Yes.
But on part of this, what people are missing out on is the tailbone portion. They can also do some things. And so a lot of times when people talk about really tilting the pelvis, they're really talking about moving their torso.
That makes sense.
They're really talking about trying to tuck, like say, tuck your tail. That's a true statement. They're really trying to tuck their tail underneath them.
Which is going to be the coccyx, the bottom of the sacrum, like those.
Yeah, they're trying to tuck that underneath them and everything like that. So now, as we talked about before, what does, because we have this thing called low back movement,
Right.
And if I move my low back, what implications I have for these other things, but that's another story.
Right.
So let's get back to this pelvic floor thing, So a lot of times, in track, you're talking about torso, and the torso tilt forward. A lot of people are upright, but if I upright it, then my hamstrings have problems.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with the pelvic floor. It has to do with my torso being in a certain situation,
Right.
And people have seen, like you see, look at some runners, what we call have big butts, and so they have a tailbone basically,
Yeah.
And people say, once again, put it underneath you. You don't run as fast.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Don't run as fast, Why? Because you're taking away your hamstring options. Once again, not a pelvic floor thing, you just took away your option and everything like that because you're trying to, take away a look. The only thing you're trying to do is take away the look. So, but even that, think about people when they squat, and this is where we get into the whole pelvic floor things and what's being squished up, what isn't being squished up, what's being, is one of the things that happens is this here, people want to hinge. If you hinge, guess what you're doing? You're trying to push everything down now because there's no,
right.
You basically, it's just a lever that if you move your low back away from it, the system elongates and makes for things, and what's the problem you see a lot of people trying to do? Hinge. And I think that's one of the biggest problems they have and why they have pelvic floor problems because they want to hinge instead of, and like I said, if you move your low back, you won't hinge or you won't squat. You're kind of in between the two.
Right.
So I think that's one of the issues that people are having is because they are squishing themselves up because they want to hinge for some reason, and you should hinging is like it's because of how the body's attached to the hamstrings, and what's going on at that point in time, But I think that's one of the problems too.
So within the pelvic floor, then, if we're somewhere in between, if we're not squatting and we're not hinging, where does that make like the center of the pelvic floor?
Well, even if you hinge or squat, the center of the body, some of the pelvic is going to be the anus. Period. It's the center.
Okay.
It's going to be the center. It's what grounds you. Is what you're going to orientate around. Is that there? But people are kind of anus phobic, so people don't want to talk about the anus. Just kind of people are like vagina phobic. They don't want to talk about the vagina, the pelvic floor. But in reality, how people sit in a sense. I mean, think about it. People think they should sit on their sit bones. You shouldn't. But things are designed that way. But really, what I want to do is, if I sit down, I'm really trying to put my anus into whatever I'm sitting on. It's a different day.
Right.
But people sit more like they're clenching their butt up, and they wonder why they hunched over and things like that. You can't. This is where you're stuck at. So now you talk about this whole pelvic floor. Once again, you're pushing these things down where it don't belong. But if you actually just flatten out and try to sit on your anus, all of a sudden you're in the right position. Things don't get squished anymore. So, but once again, people anus phobic. They want to protect it and guard it. There's nothing going up in there. It's protected. It's closed.
Right.
But at that point in time, you make it the center of being grounded. If you look at, just the way it runs and things like that, it's really the center of the body. Yeah.
So if it's the center of the body and we're talking about athletics, for instance, this is going to have implications for sports where you're in a seated position too, not just a squatted position. So if you look at like bike riding or motorcycle ride, like MotoGP, or like race car driving, like any of these things, horseback riding, right?
Anything. You've seen, people have seen, and it's one of these things that's true. But like I said, people are weird about stuff. If you see somebody, and you've seen it, somebody struggling to lift a heavy weight, what does the person do? Poke them in the anus. What do? They stand right up.
I have seen that.
They have no problem standing up. No.
That's a good point. Okay, yeah.
You see it, so yeah, so like I said, it becomes a different, I even done things with lifting, and like I said, weights get easier, range opens up, things happen if you make it the ground in the center.
Right.
If you focus on the pelvic floor, you're still missing. You're still off a little bit. And you wonder why the pelvic floor doesn't operate. Well, the pelvic floor should be the anus floor.
That makes sense. Well, and plus too, like if we're looking at like pressure dispersion and pressure and input and all of that, the pelvic floor is a pretty big area, actually.
So yeah, it's a pretty big area, and the thing is too is, it's you look at more from a relaxation standpoint. If your anus is tight, guess what's tight? All the things in the pelvic floor is tight, because you try, if the anus isn't, then guess what? Everybody relaxes and loosens up.
Well, and that makes sense when you look at the muscles, right? That I talked about, the puborectalis, that is specifically the rectum, the pubococcygis, which is going to be the tailbone, and the iliococcygis, which is also the tailbone. You've got these muscles that are all, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah. So you guys think about too, like what's if you look at some things, like I said, drawings are kind of funny. As X-rays get better, as X-rays get better, things get better, but if you kind of look at some things about how things are oriented and drawn and things like that, you'll see that it is at the center, and then you got these other things going around it and stuff like that. But the other thing too is this here, is when we move, and that becomes a question: what am I really trying to move? What am I really trying to move?
Right.
And so at that point in time, you go, okay, if this thing here is grounded and centered, it's easier for me to move my torso. Which is what I want to move. I want to move my torso.
Right.
So you kind of got to see like the bird, that tilts, with the tail. And
oh yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
What's really, it's the counter end of the tilt. But once again, because of how, I know people can't see me, but you got to understand what a fulcrum point is, and so that's why it's a good counter, because of where it sits in relation to the fulcrum point and everything like that. But then people, say what? They want to move it funny and But I think that the biggest thing with understanding is that if people would just sit and try to flatten out, that their posture would change,
Hmm.
that, their breathing would change. You're not cramped or, you're not cramped up anymore because things have done what they're supposed to do. Expand out,
Right.
like you look at modern things, how things are designed, things like that, I mean, you think about it, if things are designed in a way, what are they really trying to protect? For the guys, they're trying to protect what? The scrotum,
Right.
so you have you sit in this thing, you know, that kind of cramps you up because they want to protect that. For women, I don't know if they try and protect the vulva. I don't know. I don't know if they're trying to protect. I don't know. Because I'm not a female. I don't know how to make things for female. But I would think it's almost in the same boat. That what are you trying to protect? Or and some of these things can run a sexual lines. Well, I don't want this rubbing on something. You know, and you go, why not? Why not? Why not ride your bike and have an orgasm? Why not? Why not? You know, but it's weird when people get to start thinking and how they I want to no, sit on your ass. That's what you're supposed to do. Sit on your anus. If you sit on your
Hmm.
anus, half the things there would be no problems. You know, even when people, they did studies on like even when people sit on toilets, how you sit on a toilet will make a difference
Right.
in the ease or not ease of using the bathroom. How you
Hmm.
sit on the toilet matters. Because what do you reorient? Where the anus is things crunched up, is things not. You know, I mean, they got studies on this stuff. But I think that's the biggest problem is that people are anus phobic, and so this pelvic floor is a much better topic. Much better
It's
topic.
it sounds much more general, so it's like sounds safer, right? You're like, okay.
Yeah, it sounds, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's like, you know, but it probably needs to be brought to the forethought that people probably want to start thinking, you know, uh, um, how they sit in regards to the anus orientation. It's going to make a big difference in athletic performance. I mean, even as you move about and run, say I want to get to a loaded position. People say they want to load your hips. No,
Right.
really load your anus because it's the one thing that can load the hips. You know, but once again, I want to load my hips, but I don't want this thing over here to do it. But no, do it with that thing over there. It can, the body's weird about how it does things, and I think that's what people, miss out on. Is like how the body really does things. It's kind of weird, and it's not what we think it's doing. But it's like, yeah, check this out, which, like I said, once again, people lifting heavy weights, struggling, finger in their butt, they pop up. You see it in
Right.
football games too. You see it. You see it in football games too. Like the low line rushing. You see it. It's you know.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah. So pelvic floor is a weird thing, and I think that that's the whole problem is that we're looking at the wrong area, and half the problem is how we design modern things for us to sit on. How we do things like hinging, which we probably shouldn't be doing. And that should get a lot of people fed. What do you mean you shouldn't hinge? Hinging is bad. It's not. It's not good. It's not good. It's
Well,
just.
and it's weird because I don't know, like when you like I pay attention to how I move throughout the day just because I'm curious about it, right? And I don't ever go to do something with just a full on hinge. Like you said, it's always a combination of like a hinge slash
It's
squat
cool. Yeah,
type
yeah,
thing.
yeah. But once again, if you want to lift heavier weights, hinge is not the best way to go.
Right.
If you want to lift heavier weights, you want to do some heavy things. That's not the. If you want to move better, hinge is not the best way to go. If you want to run fast, hinge is not the best way to go. So you think about these things, and you go, it's not the best option if you're trying to be athletic. Hinge is not the best option if you're trying to be athletic. If you're trying to lift kettlebells, hinge is not the best option. But people want to swing kettlebells based on what? A hinge. Because they have
Right.
rules. I got rules. You got to swing it this way. So that becomes part of it too. Is when people start adding rules into movement, they shouldn't be there. Now you're restricting your options in the first place.
Well, and a lot of, I think it seems to me, and I could be wrong about this, but a lot of the things that's happened with the hinge pattern is the goal is to get the weight behind the heels so the feet can stay flat on the ground.
So they'll stay flat on the ground if you know, squat through your anus.
Interesting.
Gotta,
Okay.
So now I know people can't see me, and I know people can't see me, but
I'll walk them through.
yeah, walk them through. Hold on, let me.
All right. So Darian is standing up. He's going to show us, I'm assuming, a squat through the anus pattern.
So
okay, we've got 2 kettlebells on either side.
Right here, but you got to remember it's attached to my arm. So
right.
And technically, if you hinge, the weight should have came here.
Okay, so when you hinge, the weights should come in front of your body.
But if I go ahead, like I said, if I squat through my anus.
Oh, so when you squat through your anus, the weights go back instead. And you're using that to swing the kettlebells.
Low back.
Versus the low back to swing the kettlebells. Which is going to make for a much, like you were just saying, it's going to make for a much stronger swing.
It's a very much stronger swing. But it's weird how the body's really made and how it moves and things like that. And,
right.
And if you understand that, they're like, this is easy. Kettlebell swing is easy. Swing your anus. Swing your anus. Everybody, it's easy. Versus, and then I wonder why I got pelvic floor problems. Well, because you.
I have observed that as well. Like people that have, they've tried to hold everything really rigid, or they've tried to only move a certain way, or.
Yeah, and you got to think about the body as this kind of pump system. And so now you trap these things in there because you don't, this way here, the pump still continues to do its job. This way here, the pump is trapped and blocked.
Well, and when you say pump, I mean, you could think of that too as like a management of pressure issue, right? Like if you're pumping, you're putting on pressure and then you're releasing pressure, putting pressure on, releasing pressure, right?
Yeah. And that becomes, and think about this here too, why, think about, when women are pregnant, what's the greatest risk of pregnancy? Hemorrhoids. Why?
Pressure.
Yeah. Pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure, and then what? Baby gone. Guess what? Hemorrhoids gone.
Yeah.
So you deal with those things, but I think, like I said, the biggest thing is if you look at the orientation, how things designed. When people talk pelvic floor, they should be talking anus. They really should be talking how the anus is orientated. Am I sitting on it? Is it flat now? Am I moving it? Am I trying to move through it? Versus the pelvic floor.
And you know what's funny about that is everyone knows where their anus. Well, presumably people know where their anus is, so it's actually a better like visual point for people. They can be like, oh yeah, I totally know where that is. When you say pelvic floor, people are like, wait, where's my pelvic floor in space?
Yeah, and then people, once again, they get kind of vagina funny. They get kind of funny because they're like, well, people are funny. It's because people are weird about sex in the first place. That's their first. They're weird about sex and things like that. You got some other people like, hey, let me find that bed. Okay, I can do this. But people are just weird. But the whole thing about it is, and that's probably more in America than any place else, that we just weird about shit that we should be weird about. But if you really want to move better, especially if you're standing, doing things like that, because remember, what people don't understand is the legs are not there really to do what they do. They
right.
And so if I work my torso through the pelvis, the legs are free to do what they need to do, which is support you.
Yeah.
They move so much better at this point in time. You'll run better, you'll jump better, you do a lot of things better. But what are people worried about? I want to, have a neutral spine.
Right.
I don't want my pelvis to tilt this way or tilt that way. I want to restrict my movement now. It's people are taught to be straight up and down instead of because like I said, I'm like the bird now. I'm trying to tilt.
Right.
I'm trying to tilt, and it's the counter. It's like that gate that goes up, and the weight's over here. The anus is the weight of the system.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, that was fascinating. All right, there we go. So folks, everybody go home and think about where your anus is and see if you can, I guess, free your anus. No, I'm just kidding. If you can.
No, but like I said, I think that's, next time you sit down, try to sit down through your anus, and you'll find out you have a better, and there's times you don't want to do it because it's times you want to be totally relaxed.
Yeah.
It's time, if you're sitting on that, it's an alert. You're not relaxed. You're hiding alert and ready to go. You're trying to do something, and you're ready to move, you know. But if you don't want to move, then slouch away, get off of it.
All right. And maybe use it the next time you try to do a kettlebell swing.
Yeah, so easy. You know, kettlebell swing. If you're sitting on a cable machine, you know, if you squat, saying, did I? So yeah, even like this here, I do one more thing. People can't see it, but you can walk them through it. And I do it with, you know.
All right. We have a dowel. And the dowel is over. So we're imagining it's like an Olympic bar is on Adarian's shoulders.
This way here. But it becomes the same thing. You know, people here.
And he's hinging and showing us how his, oops. Dowel just broke. He was that strong. No, kidding.
He broke after all these years. All right, I'll go here then. Holy cow. So if I hinge, just people.
When he hinges, his butt goes back. Torso goes forward.
And say, see, that's why people have a hard time squatting, because they still here versus if you anus goes, you go.
Oh,
anus,
so when he initiates with his anus, the squat's a lot smoother rather than starting the squat from a hinge position.
You know, so, but the other part too is, once again, what are people concerned with? How far can they squat? You can't squat all the way down to the ground like that. You know, it's not going to go, you know, your anus is not going to the grass.
Right.
So, but you can get into a nice squat position and ease up out of it. It doesn't hurt your knees. It doesn't, you know. Man, that's one of my favorite ones.
Oh
no. Man. It must have had a crack, man. That thing snapped because it broke smooth off. It's a clean cut.
Oh.
Wow.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. Nah, it's just two short ones now. Yeah, it's clean. Like, it's not.
Oh, it's totally clean, but it's totally clean break. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it must have had a crack in it to break that clean. I mean, it's not jagged or anything. Wow. It's got two of them now. That's all.
Well, thank you for that. Like I said, that was fascinating. And we have some things coming up, don't we?
I want you to say the word plug so I can say my joke.
I think you've just ruined it. I told him earlier we were going to plug our 2 events, and you can imagine where that went.
All right.
We got a little 50 Shades of Gray here. I don't know.
I still think when they hear it, they still be like, and then tomorrow somebody will laugh like, they say anus. Plug anus. You know, yeah, people. So we got Vegas coming up, January 12th, 13th of 2024. And I'm gonna let you plug Amsterdam since you never plug it.
All right, but just where is Vegas being held?
Mandalay Bay.
Mandalay Bay. Looking forward to it. We have CEUs available for that, NSCA and NASM. And then in April, the end of April, dates are to be decided. We have Amsterdam. We're going to be holding a 5-night learning immersion experience.
Immersion retreat, yeah.
Immersion retreat. And it's at this spectacular place called the Unbound. It's going to be fantastic. So more details about that will be coming soon.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. Also, Mandalay Bay or Las Vegas event, you can see in person.
Yes.
Or you can watch it via remote. You get CEUs either way.
Yes.
You just get CEUs if you watch the recording.
Yes, that is all accurate.
Yeah. So that's the whole thing. So that's the story.
That's the story. All right, everybody. Till next time.
Peace.
Bye.